The vast majority of questions we get at the district and council level have to do with the Eagle Scout process, so we're going to spend a little bit of time going through some of the slides at a high level as far as the Eagle Scout process is concerned. So if you are involved with the Eagle Scout process at a unit level, either as an approver, that you are approving an Eagle Scout process project, or you are helping a scout put together an Eagle Scout project, or at the district level, if you are approving a project, or if you are on an Eagle Board review, what you need to be familiar with is you need to read the README first file that is located at the council website. And we do have a council website for Eagle Scouts. So if you go to GrandCanyonBSA.org, which is our council website, and you do /Eagle Scout, you go to our Eagle Scout page. You can also get to it by selecting, going to the council website, selecting advancement, pull down menu, and then select Eagle Scout. It'll bring you to the Eagle Scout page. And in that, there's a README first document, and that will walk the scout through the process from life to Eagle. So we download that document, read through that document yourself so that you're familiar with what information is there. Also, download the Eagle Scout Service Project Workbook and read the instructions at the beginning of that workbook, because they're going to explain what's expected in an Eagle Scout project. And as an approver, you need to know what's expected for an Eagle Scout project and how to review it. And then finally, if you are in the job of an approver or as an Eagle Board member, you should also download the document that's also at the Eagle Scout webpage called Notes for Eagle Project Approvers, Unit Leaders, and Boards of Review. That document, you want to download it, print it out, and use it as a reference. That's going to give you a lot of information on how to approve an Eagle Scout project. And then finally, if you want to know all of the official policies for this whole Eagle, Life to Eagle process, what you need, look at the Guide to Advancement and look at Chapter 9 of the Guide to Advancement, and that has all of the detailed information that you would need for policies and the process behind the Eagle Scout process. A little more information for verifiers. For Eagle Packet verifiers, there is a guide for them to use, and that guide is available at this link here, or by sending me an email, and I will forward the guide to you for the verifiers. It's not on the web page because it's not something that is for the general public. The job of an Eagle Packet verifier has a couple of points to it. One is they are not approving anything. Their job is to look at the packet and make sure that the scout is registered and that the application, all the blanks have been filled in and it looks okay. Also, they check the first section, the proposal section, to make sure that it's been signed off, that a proposal for the project's been signed off, and the last section to make sure that the final report has been signed off. As far as details that are in anything, that's pretty much the Board of Review's responsibility. The verifiers use a checklist. The checklist can be pre-written, pre-populated by the scout. That checklist is available on the Eagle Scout webpage, Council Eagle Scout webpage. However, that checklist is optional. We cannot, by national policy, we cannot require it to be filled in by the scout or the unit or anybody outside of the district. However, it is required to be sent in to council with the application. So if the checklist is not filled out by the scout and double checked by the verifier needs to download it and fill it out themselves as they're doing the checking of the packet. And the checklist purpose is simply to help you check the packet. Over and above what's in the checklist, you do not check. The verifier only does the job that's in the guide and using the checklist, and don't go outside of those realms, because that's really the job of either the scoutmaster on one end or the Eagle Board of Review at the other end. Basically, the administrator's job is the Eagle Pack of Verifiers' job is an administrative one. It's pretty much making sure the paperwork is more or less there that we need to move forward with the Eagle Board of Review. Now, having said that, it is important that the verifier understand what the whole process is. So we invited them to look at these presentations and to look at how the Eagle process works, because being familiar with how the Eagle process works and what's expected from the scout really does help the Eagle verifier as they work with the scout and make sure that the paper is all there. Now we're going to go through, again, some of the steps, and we're going to go through it at a high level. This is what's in Chapter 9, and as far as the steps to getting from Life to Eagle and getting the application submitted and approved. So the scout initially completes all the requirements, and then as he's doing the service project part, he completes the service project workbook. He completes the application. The scout obtains the signatures for the application and the workbook. He submits the application and the workbook to the district verifier, who then checks it and makes sure everything is there. It goes to a board of review who looks at it, who then holds an Eagle Scout board of review. If the scout submits the application and does not submit letters of reference, the district is responsible for following up with the references and contacting them and getting them. And that usually happens before the board of review. The board of review finishes up and makes a decision. When they decide that it is approved, they return the application to council with a checklist that we asked for. That application and checklist goes to council. We enter the information into a computer system for most of the scouts. The scouts that are over 18 we can't and are no longer registered, we have to do it by hand, but if they're registered, we submit it through a computer system. National returns the credentials to council, and then council sends them to the scout with some additional information. So that's at a high level is what the process is. We'll talk about some high points, and we're not going to go through everything in detail, but we will talk about some high points of the process next. Just about all the questions we get having to do with the Eagle Scout process has to do with the Eagle Scout Service Project. So we're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail. Now, the Eagle Scout Service Project requirement can be found in with the Eagle Scout requirements in the Boy Scout handbook, and he's had that handbook since he was a tenderfoot, and this requirement has not changed and is still the same, and it's in the handbook, and it's requirement number 5. And let me just read it very quickly to you. It says, while a Life Scout, plan, develop, and give leadership to others in a service project helpful to any religious institution, any school, or your community. The project must benefit an organization other than the Boy Scouts of America. A project proposal must be approved by the organization benefiting from the effort, your Scoutmaster, and unit committee, and the council or district before you start. You must use the Eagle Scout Service Project Workbook in meeting this requirement. That's the requirement. It's in his handbook. It's always been in his handbook. We assume he has read it. So let's move on. So what should the Eagle Scout's expectations be in this process? He should expect that a review of the project for approval should be helpful to him, friendly, courteous, and kind-hearted. The review isn't a test and should end with the boy being uplifted and proud. The second point is only here to make sure that a youth realizes that the proposal review process may be observed by someone of his choice if he is unsure of himself or just wishes to have some support. So somebody can be with him. It could be a parent, unit leader, or other adult may observe the proposal discussion if the scout chooses. We would like to have somebody else there just so there's no set of ears hearing what the proposal is and what we expect of him. The proposal expectations must match requirement 5. And we just read you requirement 5. And we'll go into this more. And then no more may be required than the workbook describes. So you can't require a separate workbook. You cannot require a separate worksheet. You cannot require a separate report. Only what the worksheet says is what's required for the project. And the last point is made to make sure everyone understands that filling in blanks in the workbook is asking all that is required. And in some cases, filling in those blanks may not even be filled in because they may not be applicable for the type of project that he's doing. If for any reason a proposal is edited or rejected, you need to give the scout a written explanation of why it was rejected or what suggestions you have for improvement on the project are. If a boy believes his proposal has been unnecessarily edited or rejected, you should provide him with a second opinion from the district. And if they do not come to agreement and there's still an issue, the scout can appeal to the council for yet another opinion as to whether or not the proposal should be accepted as is. The service project itself, including planning, needs to happen after the Life Scout Board of Review. Prior to a Life Scout Board of Review, the scout can look at projects that he might want to do. The scout could maybe look at, think about how he's going to write the proposal. But we don't want any detailed planning done prior to the Life Scout Board review, and we don't want any detailed planning to happen prior to the project being reviewed. Because if the project gets rejected at the proposal stage, then he's wasted his time doing detailed planning. The next part of the requirement is plan and develop. Planning and developing require forethought. However, realize that during the proposal stage, if you're looking at a proposal, planning doesn't take place, detailed planning doesn't take place until after the proposal is approved. So you're not looking for a detailed plan. You're not looking for enough of a proposal and plan that you can hand it to another scout and the other scout can just execute the plan and get it done. That is not what you're looking for at this point. You're only looking for a high-level proposal. We do not want detailed planning because if the scout does detailed planning and you reject the proposal, then he's wasted his time. Don't categorically reject a proposal. In other words, by category. If it's a blood drive, you reject it. If it's a a bike rally, you reject it. Don't do that. In fact, we have guides on the Eagle Scout page, the council page, that show how you can do a blood drive and still fit in the parameters of an Eagle Scout project. You're looking for the ability of that the scout is showing leadership, and he's demonstrating that he's planning. He's going to plan to get this done. Planning, development, and leadership are required for the project. If he does that, it could be a blood drive. It could be a bike rally. It could be anything that fits the other requirements for an Eagle project. Again, we would refer you to the notes for Eagle project approvers, unit leaders, and boards of review. That document has guidelines for everybody who's approving projects and who are helping scouts design projects. Give leadership to others. The requirement says to give leadership to others. Well, what does that mean? What does others mean? Others mean 2 other people besides the scout. At least 2 other people besides the scout. It says many people that is required to get the project done. Helpers may be BSA members or not, but should be age appropriate for the project. Each project's individual. Each project's evaluated case by case. There are no minimum requirements or expectations. You cannot say to a scout that there's a 100-hour minimum or any hour minimum to an Eagle project. You can't even infer it by saying, well, you know, the average number of hours in our district is 130 hours. The scout is smart enough to know you are trying to establish a minimum number of hours. That is not allowed. It is against BSA policy for you to do that. And it says it in black and white in the Guide to Advancement, and it says it in black and white in the Eagle Scout Service Project Workbook. Each project is an individual experience, and make sure that that scout that you have in front of you is the person doing that project. The next part of the requirement is helpful to any religious institution, any school, or your community. We often get questions, well, what does your community mean? And as far as the BSA is concerned, our community is worldwide. So it's anybody in the world. So the scope is worldwide as far as your community is concerned. A little more on this. The project beneficiary need not be a registered nonprofit as long as the project is not commercial in nature and it's benefiting the community. If there are some circumstances where a for-profit business, let's say a bank, owns a community park on their property. Then on their property they have a park area, and they've opened that up to the community. And the benches, park benches, need to be redone. The scouts can do that as a service project, an Eagle project, to redo those benches, even though the beneficiary is a bank. So in certain circumstances, even though the person owning the property is a for-profit organization, you can still do a project as long as it's benefiting the community. Benefiting an organization other than Boy Scouts of America. The beneficiary cannot include the BSA, any council property, any council camps or BSA camps. The beneficiaries may include the unit's chartered organization, other youth serving organizations like the YMCA or Big Brothers, other scouting organizations like Girl Scouts or Campfire Girls or something like that. Proposals must be approved before you start. We have actually had to tell scouts that they had to redo a project because they never did get their project approved. So A scout should make sure that they get their project approved prior to work, and that's even the beginning of the detailed planning. If a scout should accidentally jump the gun out of exuberance or misinformation or compelling circumstances, it is okay to allow the scout to continue and approve his proposal after the fact. If you have any questions on this, and if it comes up, give me a call. The requirement specifies that the scout must use the workbook in working towards his project. So the official workbook is required. It is located through a link via the Council Eagle Scout webpage. So the webpage we've been telling you about, if they go there, there's a link there to the National Eagle Scout Service Project Workbook. And that has to be downloaded, and that has to be used. It is pretty easy to follow the instructions that are in the workbook, and again, they need to actually follow the instructions in the workbook. We cannot require them to use anything else. We cannot ask them to change what's in the workbook or add to what's in the workbook. And realize that an incomplete workbook is not the basis for project rejection. The proposal section, which is the first section of the workbook, and the project report, which is the last section of the workbook, should be completed. But the middle section, which is the planning section of the workbook, is optional. It's there to help the scout and the beneficiary plan the project. Even at the end of the project, if they hand in their workbook and the middle section is blank, we still accept the project and do not require the scout to go back after the fact and after the project's already done and then plan his project and fill in that middle section. This is not an exercise in bureaucracy. We are not asking him to do that. Now, at the beginning, when you talk about the proposal, you should encourage the scout to get together with the beneficiary and fill out that middle section, because it'll make doing the project a lot easier for the scout. However, completion of the project is evidence that the project was planned. So we do not require that middle section to be done. So how to use the workbook? How should a scout approach using this workbook? Well, first, he needs to read the workbook. And he reads everything from start to finish. He reads the whole workbook. In the proposal section, when the scout signs it, he says that he has read the workbook. So on his honor, he says he's read the workbook. Make sure he has read the workbook. There is a message to scouts and parents and guardians at the beginning of the workbook. So the parents can read that part as well. The project proposal section comes next. And he needs to have that filled out. Only enough information in that so that you can understand what the proposal is of the project that he wants to do, and that's all that's necessary there. It needs to be signed by the beneficiary, it needs to be signed by the unit, and it needs to be signed by the scoutmaster, and it needs to be signed by the scout. Then it goes to the district, and the district signs it. Okay. The project plan is the middle section. Nobody signs that. It's between the scout and the beneficiary to fill that section in. The fundraising application is needed at the beginning of the project if he's going to do fundraising over $500 in cash from somebody outside of his unit and outside of his family and outside of the beneficiary. If he doesn't do that kind of fundraising, it's not required. There is detail on when the fundraising application is required when you read if you read the README file and the proposal notes. Both of those documents have information on the fundraising application when it's required. It's only required at the beginning of the project and or at the time that they're doing detailed planning. It is not required at the end of the project. So if you review a verifier and you're reviewing paperwork at the end and there is no fundraising application, well, it's the end of the project, so it's too late now. So he doesn't go asking for permission to do fundraising after the fact. The project report is the very last section of the workbook before the appendices. The project report is short. It is required. He has to fill that in and sign it. And so does the beneficiary has to sign it, and the Scoutmaster has to sign it. There is a document called Navigating the Eagle Scout Service Project. It's a one-page document that can be given to the beneficiary that explains what a Eagle Scout project is. So it's a sheet that can be Xeroxed and given to the beneficiary at the beginning of the project. A couple of years ago, National introduced the concept of an Eagle Scout Service Project coach. This is somebody who is on the district committee. He's registered as on the district committee and selected by the advancement committee from the district to assist scouts in organizing their project. Basically, that's the goal of this person. They guide the scout at a very high level with how, oh, you got to do a proposal, and then you got to get it signed, and oh, by the way, you need to do a fundraising application, get that done, and helping them through that process. And then encouraging them to start doing their planning with the beneficiary. The coach may check the plan and give them suggested improvements. And then at the end, the coach reminds him to do his project report. And then he's done. High level, it's not meant to be involved on a weekly basis. It's more like being involved at a very high level on a monthly or quarterly basis with the scout and dealing with a number of scouts. This person is not an Eagle advisor. A unit Eagle advisor is the person who works with the scout day in and day out. It's an optional position. Some districts find them useful and some don't, but that's the Eagle Project Coach. We do have some training for Eagle Project Coaches on our Council YouTube channel and also at scouting.org/advancement. There is some training there for the Eagle Project Coach. Notes that the project can't be a fundraiser. We don't do fundraising for other organizations. The project, in other words, the results of the project should not be money that's given to the other organization. Instead, we do a service, or we build something for them, or paint something or something like that. But the project cannot be solely a fundraiser. Fundraising is allowed inside the project to provide for materials or to help facilitate the project, maybe buy food, snacks for the people who are involved in the project. Fundraising applications, again, are explained in the README file, README first file, and the form is in the project workbook. We talked about this. If there is no approval needed for funds coming from the project beneficiary, the candidate or his parents, the Eagle Candidates Unit or chartered organization, or parents or members of the Eagle Candidates Unit. The donation of funds to an Eagle project, they're not donating to the Boy Scouts of America. They're donating to the beneficiary of the project. So if somebody is looking for a tax ID, the tax ID is the beneficiary's tax ID. If they're looking for something on a letterhead saying thank you for your donation, that should be on the letterhead of the beneficiary, because they're donating to the beneficiary. Read the application, the instructions with the application, and it explains this in more detail. Again, this is in the Eagle Scout Service Project Workbook. Routine labor. Routine labor is not normally considered appropriate for a project. And we get questions on this from time to time. Well, what is routine labor? Routine labor is defined as a job or service that is part of the Scout's daily life, like mowing lawns. Also, it's something that is scheduled on a routine basis by the beneficiary. The example that's used often is weeding a football field at the school. The school hires gardeners who weed the football field on a regular basis. If the Scout says, well, I volunteer my troop, we're going to do an Eagle project to weed the football field at school, well, that's routine labor, and that's not allowed as an Eagle project. Now, how do you tell if something's routine labor or not? Well, if it's in a gray area, then ask the question of the beneficiary, is this something you have scheduled on your calendar to do on a regular basis? It could be once a quarter, it could be once a year, it could be once every 5 years. And you have money in your budget to get this done. If they say, well, no, we didn't even think about this, and now it's come up that we need it, so we need to try to find funds, we need to try to find resources, we need to make a special project out of it. Well, as soon as they start talking special project, then you know it's not routine labor. So ask the beneficiary to find out if this is something that's routine maintenance. Painting fire hydrants is routine maintenance, and we really should not be approving projects that paint fire hydrants. That's on a city's budget, that's routine maintenance. The fact that they're trying to save some money by asking Scouts to do it does not make it a special project. It's still routine maintenance. That's where that gray area is. If you have a question, again, you can reach out to my office, and we'd be more than happy to discuss it with you. Let's talk about some common misconceptions. There are no minimum number of hours that are required for an Eagle project. We talked about that. Only one candidate may receive credit for working on the same project. So if you have two Scouts and they both want to work on the same project, they can't both get credit of it being their Eagle project. So you can't have two people doing the same project as their Eagle project. And the project need not have lasting value. It could be collections. It could be, as I mentioned before, blood drive. It could be organizing a children's show for a hospital. So it doesn't have to be something that is of lasting value. When evaluating the project, evaluate the impact, the benefit to the school, the religious institution, or the community. What is the leadership that the Scout is going to provide? What kind of planning and development is necessary to make the project happen? Those are all components of an Eagle project, and we want to make sure that they're in all of the projects that you approve. The unit leader or project beneficiary may choose to not approve the project at the end of the project if service or impact is deemed insufficient. In which case the candidate may be requested to do more work, or he may be requested to start over again. The candidate has some options. He can comply with the request, or he can decline the request and submit an application without final approval. So he can submit his workbook to the district verifier without signatures from the beneficiary or some other person that needs to sign it at the end, and then the Board of Review needs to take it all under consideration and make a final judgment. The problem here is a Scout only has one Eagle Board of Review. You can't redo an Eagle Board of Review. So if the Board of Review determines that the project's insufficient, that was his one and only chance. The only option he has at that point is to appeal the decision, which then would go to the council office. We would put together an appeals board who would review and look only at why it was rejected and make a recommendation to National, who would do their own review and make a determination. So there's one shot at an Eagle Board of Review. So before that candidate gets in front of the board, he better be very sure that that's the direction he wants to go. When evaluating the project in such a case, the Board of Review should approve it if the proposal was approved and the Scout did what was proposed, or at least in a good faith effort tried to do what was proposed. And if the project was well led and carried out to the satisfaction of the unit and project beneficiary. Rejection should be very rare. Requirement 5 is written, as written. If it was not satisfied, then that would be a reason for rejection. Remember, project approvals may never be withheld for reasons unrelated to the project. You can't say, I won't approve your project because you showed bad Scout spirit. Scout spirit's a different requirement. If the project was done, it was done, and you sign off on the project. If the Scout does not have good Scout spirit, you do not sign him off on Scout spirit. And then he still doesn't advance, but it's not because of the project. So keep in mind what you're doing when you're doing it. From time to time we get requests for time extensions for earning Eagle. Let me tell you, they are also very rare that they get approved. The only time that they do get approved is if the reason that the Scout cannot finish the requirements by the time the Scout is 18 is because of circumstances beyond their control. So if that's not the case, it is not going to satisfy. It's not going to be granted. The other case would be if they're disabled and they are special needs, they may already have the age requirement lifted. We'll talk about special needs on further slides. This next slide goes into detail on how to qualify for time extensions. So to qualify for a time extension, you must have joined, rejoined, or become active again, so all requirements were able to be completed before the age of 18. Okay, so this is just to prevent a Scout from making it to life and then quitting, joining 2 months before he's 18, and then wanting an age extension because Scout needs 6 months of service. Can't do that. So that's what that means. The new circumstance precludes completion before the deadline. So that circumstances has to be beyond the control of the youth, severe and not the norm in the Scout's life, could not have been planned or anticipated. So if it falls into those categories, then we can consider whether or not to have a time extension for the Eagles project. Usually time extensions are between 3 and 6 months. The Council Advancement Committee's role is to look at the request, collect evidence, recommend action, and then provide all that information to the National Advancement Team, who then makes the final determination. Let's review again where you can find more information on the Eagle rank process. First off, go to the Council website, which is grandcanyonbsa.org/Eagle Scout. Read the README file that is there, and also read the download and read the Eagle Scout Service Project Workbook. If you're an approver of an Eagle project, or if you sit on an Eagle Board of Review, you should be also get a copy of the notes for Eagle project approvers, unit leaders, and boards of review. That's also on that website. And if you have time, go ahead and read the Guide to Advancement Chapter 9, which is the Eagle Scout rank section of the Guide to Advancement. If you are an Eagle Packet Verifier, you should get the Eagle Packet Verifiers Guide, and that's located at bit.ly/verifiers. And also make sure that you have a checklist that is available at the Council Eagle page. So that's where you guys can find more information for your job and to get your job done.